March 12, 1982. Deep beneath the mountains of central Utah, 8 miners descend into the earth for what should be a routine shift at the Copper Ridge mine. By 2:47 that afternoon, all 8 men lie buried under thousands of tons of rock and earth, trapped in complete darkness, 200 feet below the surface. 8 families will wait through agonizing days as rescue teams work desperately to reach their loved ones. But the mountain has already claimed its victims. All 8 miners perish in what becomes one of Utah's deadliest mining disasters of the 1980s, a tragedy that exposes catastrophic failures in ground support systems and forever changes how America monitors unstable rock formations in deep underground mines. If you want to understand how this tragedy claimed 8 lives and what it teaches us about the hidden dangers lurking in the earth beneath our feet, subscribe to this channel. This episode is a fictionalized reconstruction inspired by real mining accidents and safety investigations from the period. Names, locations, and specific events have been created for storytelling purposes. The Copper Ridge mine sits in the Wasatch Mountains of central Utah, approximately 40 miles southwest of Price, in terrain that has yielded precious metals and minerals for over a century. The mine itself burrows into the western face of Copper Ridge, a massive formation of sedimentary rock layered over millions of years, compressed and fractured by ancient tectonic forces that created both valuable mineral deposits and inherent geological instability. In March 1982, the region experiences an unusually wet winter. Heavy snowpack accumulates in the high country throughout January and February, and by early March, daytime temperatures begin rising above freezing. Water seeps through countless fissures and cracks in the mountain, saturating rock layers that have remained relatively dry for decades. The mine entrance sits at 7,200 feet elevation, where snow still covers the ground in thick drifts, but inside the mountain, temperatures hold steady at 58 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. The air smells of wet rock, diesel exhaust from underground vehicles, and the distinctive mineral tang of exposed ore faces. Copper Ridge Mine operates as a room and pillar operation, a mining method where miners excavate ore in a pattern that leaves pillars of unmined material to support the overhead rock. The technique works well in stable geological formations, but requires constant vigilance in areas where rock quality varies or where water infiltration compromises structural integrity. The mine employs 43 workers across 2 shifts, producing copper ore that feeds smelters in the Salt Lake Valley. It's a small operation compared to the massive open-pit mines that dominate Utah's mineral industry, but it provides good wages and stable employment in a rural county where economic options remain limited. Many of the miners come from families with generations of mining experience. They understand the risks inherent in underground work, but they also trust that modern engineering, proper ground support, and rigorous safety protocols will keep them safe. On March 12th, that trust proves tragically misplaced. The mine has operated since 1957, originally developed by Mountain States Copper Company and later acquired by Western Minerals Corporation in 1974. Throughout its 25-year history, Copper Ridge maintains a relatively clean safety record with no fatalities and only minor injuries reported to the Mine Safety and Health Administration. Federal inspectors conduct quarterly examinations, and the mine passes its most recent inspection in December 1981 with only minor citations for inadequate ventilation in one remote section and insufficient fire extinguisher placement near the maintenance shop. The inspection report notes some ground control concerns in the deeper sections of the mine, particularly in areas where mining operations approach old workings from the 1960s, but inspectors determined that existing roof bolt patterns and timber supports meet minimum federal standards. What the inspection doesn't capture, however, is the gradual deterioration occurring in a critical section of the mine known as the East Gallery, a network of rooms and tunnels that extends nearly a quarter mile into the mountain at the 200-foot level. The East Gallery represents some of the mine's most productive ground, with high-grade copper ore that makes the challenging extraction worthwhile, despite increasingly difficult geological conditions. Miners working this section report occasional working ground, the term they use for rock that creaks, pops, and shifts as stress redistributes through the mountain. Such sounds are common in deep mines and don't necessarily indicate imminent danger, but experienced miners know to watch for changes in the frequency and intensity of these warnings. In February 1982, several miners mentioned increased rock noise in the East Gallery, and the day shift supervisor, Thomas Beckman, requests additional roof bolting in 2 rooms where small cracks appear in the ceiling. Maintenance crews install extra bolts, but no comprehensive engineering assessment takes place. The mine operates under pressure to maintain production quotas, and stopping operations for detailed ground surveys means lost revenue. Management decides the additional bolting is sufficient, a decision that will haunt survivors and investigators for years to come. 8 men report for the day shift on March 12th. Assigned to work in various sections of the East Gallery shift supervisor, Thomas Beckman, 46 years old, has worked at Copper Ridge for 18 years, rising through the ranks from mucker to driller to his current supervisory position. Beckman knows the mine better than anyone, can navigate its tunnels in complete darkness, and takes pride in his safety record. Miner James Kowalski, 34, operates the continuous mining machine, a powerful piece of equipment that grinds ore from the rock face. Kowalski transferred to Copper Ridge 3 years earlier from a coal mine in Wyoming, bringing expertise in machine operation and ground control. Robert Chen, 42, serves as the section's lead driller, responsible for placing blast holes that will fracture the ore for easier extraction. Chen emigrated from Taiwan in 1968, found work in Utah's mines, and built a reputation as meticulous and safety-conscious operator. David Martinez, 29, handles the shuttle car that transports ore from the mining face to the main haulage system. Martinez is relatively new to mining, having worked at Copper Ridge for only 14 months, but he demonstrates natural aptitude and earns the respect of veteran miners. Roof bolter William Foster, 51, specializes in installing the long steel bolts that pin unstable rock layers together. Foster has worked in mines since age 19 and survived 2 previous cave-ins during his career, walking away both times with nothing worse than bruises. Electrician Raymond Santos, 38, maintains the complex electrical systems that power equipment and lighting throughout the mine. Mechanic Paul Anderson, 44, keeps the diesel vehicles and mining machines running despite the harsh underground environment. Finally, utility worker Michael Torres, 26, the youngest member of the crew, performs various support tasks from laying track to moving supplies. The shift begins at 6 in the morning with a brief safety meeting in the dry house, the building at the mine entrance where workers change into their gear. Beckman reviews the day's assignments, mentions that the ground has been talking more than usual in the East Gallery, and reminds everyone to watch for loose rock and report any unusual conditions immediately. The crew gears up, donning hard hats with cap lamps, battery packs, self-rescuer devices for emergency oxygen, and heavy work boots with steel toes. They board the man-trip, a low-slung rail vehicle designed to transport miners through the narrow tunnels, and begin the 20-minute journey into the mountain. The man-trip descends through the main decline, a gradually sloping tunnel that spirals deeper into the earth, passing through ventilation doors and junction points where other tunnels branch off toward abandoned sections of the mine. The air grows cooler and damper as they descend. Water drips from the ceiling in places, forming small pools along the track. The walls glisten with moisture, and the miners can see their breath in the beam of their cap lamps. At the 200-foot level, the man-trip stops at a staging area where equipment and supplies are stored. The crew disembarks and walks the final 300 yards to the East Gallery work area, their boots splashing through shallow puddles, their lamps casting dancing shadows on the rough rock walls. The East Gallery itself consists of a main haulage drift approximately 12 feet wide and 8 feet high, with multiple rooms branching off at regular intervals. These rooms, where the actual ore extraction takes place, measure 30 feet wide and extend 40 to 60 feet into the solid rock. Pillars of unmined ore, each 30 feet square, separate the rooms and support the thousands of tons of rock overhead. In theory, the pillar system creates a stable structure, but the theory depends on uniform rock quality and predictable stress distribution. The geology at Copper Ridge, however, proves far from uniform. The ore body lies within a layer of limestone underlain by shale and overlain by sandstone, and the contact zones between these different rock types create planes of weakness where failure can initiate. By 7 in the morning, the crew disperses to their assigned tasks. Beckman conducts a quick examination of the work area, tapping the roof with a long scaling bar to listen for hollow sounds that might indicate loose rock. He finds nothing obviously dangerous, though he notes that the ground continues making occasional popping noises, stress releasing in the rock as the mine slowly adjusts to the void created by mining. Kowalski starts up the continuous miner, a machine that looks like a giant mechanical insect with rotating cutting heads. The machine roars to life, its diesel engine echoing through the chambers as it begins chewing into the ore face in room 7. The westernmost active excavation, Chen and his drilling helpers set up their equipment in room 5, preparing to drill a pattern of holes for the next blast. Martinez positions his shuttle car to receive ore from Kowalski's machine. Foster and his assistant begin installing roof bolts in room 3, where recent mining has exposed fresh ceiling. Santos checks electrical connections and troubleshoots a malfunctioning ventilation fan. Anderson performs routine maintenance on a front-end loader. Torres moves supplies and cleans up debris from the previous shift. The morning progresses normally. Ore moves from the mining face to the shuttle cars to the main conveyor system. The continuous miner advances deeper into room 7, cutting a face that will eventually extend 60 feet from the main drift drills bite into rock, creating holes that will later be packed with explosives. Roof bolts go into place, 6-foot steel rods driven deep into the ceiling and tensioned to bind fractured rock layers into a stable beam. The work is loud, physical, and repetitive, but the crew falls into the familiar rhythm of industrial mining. They don't notice the subtle changes occurring in the rock around them. Deep within the mountain, water from the spring snowmelt percolates through fractures, reducing friction along planes of weakness. The weight of the overburden, thousands of tons of rock pressing down on the excavated rooms, slowly concentrates stress on the remaining pillars. In areas where the pillars are slightly undersized or where the rock quality is marginal, that stress approaches the failure threshold. The mountain is preparing to move, and the 8 men working below remain unaware that they are running out of time. At 1:30 in the afternoon, Chen finishes drilling his pattern in room 5 and moves his equipment to room 6 to begin another set of holes. The drilling creates vibrations that propagate through the rock, tiny shock waves that would be insignificant in stable ground, but that can trigger failure in rock already stressed to its limit. At 2:15, Foster completes the roof bolting in room 3 and radios Beckman to report the work finished. Beckman acknowledges and instructs Foster to move to room 4, where the ceiling will need bolting after the next blast cycle. At 2:30, Kowalski shuts down the continuous miner for a routine maintenance check, giving Anderson time to inspect the cutting heads and replace worn teeth. The sudden silence feels almost oppressive after hours of mechanical noise. In the quiet, several miners notice that the rock sounds different. The occasional pops and cracks they've heard all morning seem more frequent, more insistent. Beckman walks through the work area again, listening, watching for visible signs of stress like fresh cracks or sagging roof. He sees nothing that triggers immediate alarm, but something feels wrong. The mountain is telling him something, and his decades of experience make him uneasy. At 2:43 in the afternoon, the initial failure occurs in the roof of room 7, where Kowalski's mining machine has advanced to the maximum depth. A layer of sandstone approximately 20 feet above the excavated opening begins to separate from the overlying rock along a bedding plane weakened by water infiltration. The separation starts as a hairline crack that propagates laterally across the room's width in less than a second. The sandstone layer, now detached from the rock above, begins to sag under its own weight. The roof bolts in room 7, installed according to standard patterns, cannot prevent the failure because the separation occurs above the bolted zone in rock assumed to be stable. As the sandstone sags, it loads the pillars on either side of room 7 with additional weight they were not designed to carry. The pillars, already stressed near their capacity, begin to fail in progressive crushing rock in the pillar core's fractures and spalls, causing the pillars to shorten by inches, allowing more roof to sag, creating a cascade of increasing stress and progressive failure. At 2:44, miners throughout the East Gallery hear a deep, low-frequency rumble that seems to come from everywhere at once. The sound resembles distant thunder but feels different, more visceral, transmitted through the rock itself rather than through the air. Beckman immediately understands what is happening and keys his radio, shouting for everyone to evacuate immediately. His voice carries urgent authority, and the crew responds instantly, dropping tools and moving toward the main haulage drift that leads to safety. But they have less than 3 minutes, and the mine is 200 feet deep, with a quarter mile of tunnel between them and the surface. They cannot possibly reach safety in time. At 2:45, the roof in room 7 collapses completely. Hundreds of tons of sandstone crash down in a thundering avalanche of rock, burying Kowalski's mining machine and filling the room from floor to ceiling. The collapse generates a powerful blast of air that roars through the connecting tunnels, extinguishing some cap lamps and filling the mine with choking dust. The sudden removal of support where Room 7 once existed causes immediate redistribution of stress to adjacent areas. The pillars between Rooms 7 and 6 and between 7 and 8 can no longer bear the load. They begin failing in rapid succession, crushing and spalling in a progressive collapse that marches through the East Gallery like falling dominoes. At 2:46, Room 6 and 8 collapse almost simultaneously. Chen, who had been drilling in Room 6, runs toward the main drift, but the ceiling comes down before he reaches the opening. Torres, who was moving supplies near Room 8, also becomes trapped as thousands of tons of rock fill the space where he was working. The collapse now extends across a front nearly 100 feet wide. The main haulage drift, which runs perpendicular to the rooms, begins experiencing roof failure as the collapsing rooms undermine its stability. Large slabs of rock fall from the ceiling, blocking the tunnel and cutting off the escape route for the remaining miners. At 2:47, the progressive collapse reaches its maximum extent. Rooms 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 all lie buried under massive piles of broken rock. The main haulage drift is blocked in multiple locations, with roof falls creating impassable barriers. The violence of the collapse generates seismic waves that register on monitoring equipment at the University of Utah, where seismologists initially mistake the event for a small earthquake. Underground, the 8 miners find themselves in a nightmare scenario. Beckman, Martinez, Santos, Anderson, and Foster are together near the entrance to Room 3 when the main drift ceiling collapses behind them, cutting them off from the route to the surface. Kowalski is buried in Room 7 under the initial collapse. Chen is trapped in Room 6. Torres is caught in Room 8. All 8 men are now isolated in separate sections of the collapsed mine, surrounded by unstable rock, breathing air thick with dust, and facing the terrifying reality that thousands of tons of debris stand between them and rescue. The collapse creates additional hazards beyond the immediate burial. The ventilation system, which normally circulates fresh air through the mine, is disrupted by the roof falls. Dust concentrations reach levels that make breathing difficult. The men activate their self-rescuer devices, small oxygen generators that provide 30 to 60 minutes of breathable air, but they know these devices offer only temporary protection. Carbon dioxide begins accumulating in the blocked sections. Without ventilation, the oxygen levels will gradually drop while toxic gases accumulate. The miners also face the threat of secondary collapses. The initial roof fall destabilizes surrounding rock, and additional failures can occur hours or even days after the initial event. Every sound, every vibration, every creak and pop in the darkness reminds the trapped men that more rock could come down at any moment. Surface personnel become aware of the emergency at 2:51 when the mine's seismic monitoring system triggers alarms in the control room. The mine manager, Richard Hayes, immediately attempts to radio Beckman, but receives no response. He activates the mine's emergency response plan, contacting the Mine Safety and Health Administration, local emergency services, and the company's corporate headquarters. Within minutes, the mine entrance becomes a hub of frantic activity. Off-shift miners arrive to volunteer for rescue efforts. Emergency vehicles converge on the site, their lights flashing in the late afternoon sun. News crews monitoring emergency radio frequencies begin arriving within an hour. Hayes organizes a rescue team, but the team faces an agonizing dilemma. They know men are trapped underground, possibly injured, definitely in danger, but they also know that rushing into an unstable mine could result in additional casualties. They must balance the desperate need for speed against the requirement for caution. The initial rescue team, consisting of 6 experienced miners, equipped with breathing apparatus and emergency supplies, enters the mine at 3:45, nearly an hour after the collapse. They proceed cautiously down the main decline, checking roof conditions constantly, shoring up questionable areas with timber supports before advancing. They reach the 1,200-foot level at 4:20 and immediately encounter massive roof falls that completely block the main haulage drift leading to the East Gallery. The falls extend from floor to ceiling, filling the tunnel with broken rock, and the rescue team cannot determine how far back the blockage extends. It could be 20 feet or it could be 200 feet. Without knowing the extent of the collapse, they cannot estimate how long it will take to dig through to the trapped miners. The team leader radios to the surface, describing the situation and requesting heavy equipment and additional personnel. Hayes realizes that the rescue will require days, not hours, and that the chance of finding the trapped miners alive decreases with every passing minute. Throughout the night, rescue crews work in shifts, carefully removing rock from the blocked tunnel. They use small front-end loaders to scoop up debris, but they must work slowly to avoid triggering additional collapses. Every few hours, they stop all equipment and call out, listening for any response from the trapped miners. They hear nothing but the occasional crack and pop of settling rock. By dawn on March 13th, they have advanced only 30 feet through the blockage. At this rate, reaching the East Gallery will take days. Engineers arrive from the Mine Safety and Health Administration and from private consulting firms to assess the situation and advise on rescue strategy. They study mine maps, examine the geology, and calculate the likely extent of the collapse. Their conclusions are grim. The collapse appears to extend across at least 6 rooms, involving an estimated 50,000 to 75,000 tons of rock. The trapped miners, if they survive the initial collapse, are isolated in spaces with limited air supply and no ventilation. The engineers estimate that survivable air will last perhaps 48 hours, possibly less if the miners are injured and breathing rapidly. On March 14th, rescue crews working from the main decline finally break through the first major blockage and enter a section of the main haulage drift that, while damaged, remains passable. They advance toward the East Gallery, finding additional roof falls that require clearing. At 2 in the afternoon, they reach the area where Beckman's crew was last known to be working. What they find confirms their worst fears. The main drift near room 3 is completely collapsed, with roof failure extending for over 100 feet. The rooms themselves are filled floor to ceiling with broken rock. The rescue team begins the heartbreaking work of searching for bodies, carefully removing debris, probing voids, and documenting what they find. The work is dangerous, with the constant threat of additional collapses, and emotionally devastating for the rescuers, many of whom knew the trapped miners personally. Over the following days, rescue teams recover the bodies of all 8 miners. The recovery operation takes nearly a week, requiring the careful removal of thousands of tons of rock and the installation of extensive ground support to protect the rescue workers. Beckman, Martinez, Santos, Anderson, and Foster are found together in a small void space near room 3, where they had retreated after the main drift collapsed. They had survived the initial collapse but were overcome by toxic gas and oxygen depletion within hours. Their self-rescuer devices, designed for short-term emergency use during evacuation, could not sustain them in the sealed environment. Kowalski's body is recovered from room 7, buried under the initial roof fall. Chen is found in room 6, and Torres in room 8. All 8 men perish in the collapse, unable to escape or survive long enough for rescue to reach them. The medical examiner determines that the cause of death for all 8 victims is asphyxiation due to oxygen depletion and carbon dioxide poisoning, though several also sustained traumatic injuries during the collapse that may have contributed to their deaths. The immediate aftermath of the disaster brings grief and outrage to the small mining community. 8 families lose husbands, fathers, and sons. Memorial services draw hundreds of mourners. The mine closes indefinitely as investigators descend on the site to determine what went wrong and why 8 men died in a collapse that should have been preventable. The Mine Safety and Health Administration launches a comprehensive investigation, assigning a team of engineers, geologists, and safety specialists to examine every aspect of the mine's design, operation, and ground control practices. They conduct detailed mapping of the collapsed area, collect rock samples for laboratory testing, review the mine's inspection records, interview survivors and managers, and reconstruct the sequence of events that led to the fatal collapse. The investigation reveals a cascade of failures that, taken together, created the conditions for disaster. The fundamental problem lies in the mine's ground control plan, the engineering document that specifies how the mine will be excavated and supported to prevent roof collapse. The plan, developed in 1975 and updated only minimally since then, is based on assumptions about rock quality and behavior that prove incorrect for the geology encountered in the East Gallery. The plan specifies pillar dimensions and roof bolt patterns that would be adequate in strong, uniform rock. But the East Gallery penetrates a zone where the rock quality is marginal, and where geological structures create planes of weakness. The investigation determines that the pillars in the East Gallery are undersized by approximately 20% compared to what modern engineering analysis would recommend for the actual rock conditions. The investigation also identifies water infiltration as a critical contributing factor. The unusually wet winter of 1981-1982 results in significantly more groundwater entering the mine than in typical years. This water weakens the rock in two ways. First, water reduces the friction along bedding planes and fractures, making it easier for rock layers to separate and slide past each other. Second, water increases the weight of the rock mass, adding to the stress on pillars and roof supports. The mine's drainage systems, designed for normal water conditions, prove inadequate for the high water volumes encountered in early 1982. Investigators find evidence that water was pooling in several areas of the East Gallery, saturating the rock and creating conditions favorable for failure. The investigation reveals that warning signs were present but were not adequately recognized or acted upon. The increased rock noise reported by miners in the weeks before the collapse indicated that the ground was under stress and approaching failure. The minor roof cracks observed in February were additional warnings. While the mine management responded to these signs by installing additional roof bolts, they did not conduct a comprehensive engineering assessment to determine whether the fundamental ground control plan remained adequate. The investigation concludes that a proper assessment would have revealed the need for additional pillars, wider safety margins, and possibly a reduction in the size of the rooms being excavated. The pressure to maintain production, combined with a lack of detailed technical analysis, led management to underestimate the severity of the ground control problems. Investigators also examined the mine's emergency preparedness and the response to the collapse. They find that while the mine had an emergency response plan on paper, the plan had not been regularly practiced or updated. The rescue took longer than it should have because equipment and supplies were not pre-positioned at strategic locations underground. Communication systems failed during the collapse, leaving the trapped miners unable to contact the surface and rescue teams unable to coordinate effectively. The investigation recommends significant improvements in emergency response capabilities, including better communication systems, pre-positioned rescue equipment, and regular emergency drills. The root cause analysis identifies the fatal collapse as resulting from inadequate pillar design combined with adverse geological conditions and water infiltration. The pillars in the East Gallery were not strong enough to support the overburden under the conditions that existed in March 1982. The initial failure in Room 7 triggered a progressive collapse that propagated through adjacent rooms faster than the miners could evacuate. The investigation concludes that the deaths of the 8 miners could have been prevented through better engineering, more rigorous ground control practices, and more conservative mining methods. The report is unflinching in its criticism of the mine's management and the adequacy of existing regulations. The legal consequences of the disaster unfold over several years. The families of the 8 dead miners file wrongful death lawsuits against Western Minerals Corporation, alleging negligence in ground control, inadequate safety measures, and failure to respond to warning signs. The company initially contests the suits, but eventually settles out of court for undisclosed amounts. The Mine Safety and Health Administration issues citations and fines totaling over $500,000, at that time one of the largest penalties ever assessed for a mining accident. The company also faces criminal negligence charges filed by the Utah Attorney General. But these charges are ultimately dismissed when prosecutors determine they cannot prove the specific criminal intent required under existing law. The mine never reopens. Western Minerals Corporation, facing financial losses from the settlement payments, fines, and the cost of making the mine safe enough to extract remaining equipment, decides to abandon the property. The mine entrance is sealed with concrete in 1984, and the site is gradually reclaimed by nature. The disaster prompts significant changes in mining regulations and practices, both in Utah and nationally. The Mine Safety and Health Administration revises its ground control standards, requiring more detailed engineering analysis, more conservative pillar designs, and better monitoring of ground conditions. New regulations mandate that mines in areas with variable geology or significant water infiltration must conduct regular ground stability assessments using modern analytical methods. The regulations also require improved emergency communication systems and more robust rescue equipment stationed underground at all times. Mining companies must develop and regularly practice comprehensive emergency response plans. Roof bolting standards are upgraded, requiring longer bolts, tighter spacing, and better quality control in installation. The technical lessons learned from Copper Ridge influence mining engineering for decades. The disaster demonstrates the danger of progressive collapse in room and pillar mines, where the failure of one pillar can trigger a cascade of failures that propagates through large areas faster than miners can escape. This leads to the development of better analytical tools for predicting and preventing progressive collapse, including computer modeling that can simulate how stress redistributes through a mine as excavation progresses. The disaster also highlights the importance of monitoring ground conditions continuously rather than relying on periodic inspections. Modern mines now use sophisticated instrumentation to detect subtle changes in ground movement, stress levels, and rock noise that can provide early warning of impending failure. The Copper Ridge disaster becomes a case study in mining engineering programs and safety training courses. Students and professionals study the sequence of events, the contributing factors, and the lessons learned. The disaster is remembered not just as a tragedy, but as a turning point that forced the mining industry to confront inadequate practices and embrace more rigorous engineering standards. The 8 men who died become, in a sense, teachers whose deaths educate future generations of miners and engineers about the consequences of cutting corners and ignoring warning signs. The families of the victims work to ensure their loved ones are remembered and that their deaths lead to meaningful change. A memorial is erected near the sealed mine entrance, listing the names of the 8 men who perished: Thomas Beckman, James Kowalski, Robert Chen, David Martinez, William Foster, Raymond Santos, Paul Anderson, and Michael Torres. Every year on March 12th, a small group gathers at the memorial for a ceremony honoring the dead and recommitting to the cause of mine safety. The memorial becomes a place of reflection, a reminder of the human cost of industrial accidents, and a symbol of the ongoing struggle to balance economic productivity with worker safety. In the years following the disaster, mining fatalities in the United States declined significantly, though whether this is due specifically to lessons learned from Copper Ridge or to broader trends in mining safety is difficult to determine. What is clear is that the disaster contributes to a cultural shift in how the mining industry approaches safety. The attitude that accidents are an inevitable cost of doing business gives way to a belief that all accidents are preventable through proper engineering, adequate training, and a commitment to putting safety ahead of production pressures. This cultural change, perhaps more than any specific regulation or technical improvement, represents the lasting legacy of the 8 men who died at Copper Ridge. The disaster also raises broader questions about risk, responsibility, and the value placed on workers' lives. The 8 miners who descended into the earth on March 12, 1982, trusted that their employer had taken all reasonable precautions to ensure their safety. That trust proved misplaced. The investigation reveals that the company knew, or should have known, that the ground control plan was inadequate for the conditions in the East Gallery. The decision to continue mining under those conditions, driven by economic pressures and a desire to maintain production, directly contributed to the deaths of 8 men. This raises uncomfortable questions about corporate responsibility and the mechanisms society uses to hold companies accountable when their decisions lead to worker deaths. The Copper Ridge disaster demonstrates that mining, despite all the advances in technology and engineering, remains inherently dangerous. Miners venture into hostile environments where the margin for error is small and where mistakes can be instantly fatal. The 8 men who died were not careless or reckless. They were skilled professionals doing their jobs in accordance with their training and their employer's instructions. They died because the engineering was inadequate, the warnings were ignored, and the economic pressure to produce overcame the imperative to ensure safety. Their deaths serve as a stark reminder that worker safety requires constant vigilance, adequate resources, and a willingness to stop production when conditions become unsafe. In the decades since the Copper Ridge collapse, mining technology has advanced tremendously. Modern mines use remote-operated equipment that keeps workers away from the most dangerous areas. Sophisticated monitoring systems provide real-time data on ground conditions, allowing engineers to detect problems before they become critical. Computer modeling allows engineers to test different mining scenarios virtually, identifying potential hazards before any excavation begins. Regulations are more stringent, enforcement is more rigorous, and the industry's safety culture is stronger. Yet mining accidents still occur, and miners still die. The lessons of Copper Ridge remain relevant because the fundamental challenges remain the same. How to extract valuable resources from the earth while protecting the lives of the workers who do this dangerous work. The 8 men who lost their lives in the Copper Ridge mine collapse of 1982 were more than statistics in a government report or names on a memorial plaque. They were husbands and fathers, sons and brothers, colleagues and friends. Thomas Beckman had guided younger miners and took pride in his safety record. James Kowalski brought expertise from years of mining experience in other states. Robert Chen built a new life in America through hard work and dedication. David Martinez was still early in his mining career with decades of work ahead of him. William Foster survived 2 previous cave-ins only to perish in a third. Raymond Santos kept the electrical systems running that powered the mine. Paul Anderson maintained the equipment that made the work possible. Michael Torres, the youngest of the group, had his whole life ahead of him. All 8 died doing honest work, trusting that the mine was safe, and counting on seeing their families again at the end of the shift. That they did not come home that day represents a failure not just of engineering, but of the social contract between workers and employers, between individuals and the institutions that are supposed to protect them. The legacy of the Copper Ridge disaster extends beyond the immediate technical and regulatory changes it prompted. The disaster serves as a reminder of the human cost of industrial work and the moral imperative to prioritize safety over profit. It demonstrates that seemingly small decisions, like choosing not to conduct an additional engineering study or deciding that existing ground support is adequate without verification, can have catastrophic consequences. It shows that warning signs must be taken seriously, that production pressures must never override safety concerns, and that workers' lives depend on the competence and integrity of the engineers and managers who design and operate industrial facilities. These lessons apply not just to mining, but to every industry where workers face hazards in their daily work. Today, the Copper Ridge mine site sits abandoned, the entrance sealed, the buildings collapsed or removed, nature slowly reclaiming the scarred mountainside. But the lessons learned from the 8 deaths that occurred there continue to influence mining practices worldwide. Every mine that uses improved ground control methods, every worker who benefits from better emergency communication systems, every family that welcomes a miner home safely at the end of a shift owes something to the men who died at Copper Ridge and to the investigators, regulators, and industry professionals who learned from that tragedy and worked to ensure it would not be repeated. The 8 miners who perished on March 12, 1982, did not die in vain if their deaths led to changes that saved other lives. That is cold comfort to the families who lost loved ones, but it is the only meaning that can be wrested from a senseless tragedy. If this story about preventable tragedy and lost lives gave you insight into why safety matters, leave your like and share with others who appreciate learning from fatal accidents so that others might live. The 8 men of Copper Ridge deserve to be remembered not just as victims, but as catalysts for change that made mining safer for all who followed them into the earth.